The sister worker's mother says, I want to see the baby. It never occurs to me that I can tell her no, because this is the sister worker and this is the sister worker's mother. You know, she's got power over me. So I hand her my infant child. She goes into the bedroom and closes the door. So I go and I open the door. She has my baby on the bed. All of his blankets are unwrapped. She has his shirt off, his pants off. She's taking his diaper off. She's examining him. Why is she examining my child's nude body? She told me that I wouldn't be allowed to continue professing if I didn't agree to give my child up. I believed that I was choosing hell or the risk of hell in order to keep my child. We get to chatting and I find out this has happened to hundreds of women. People who are steeped in that are in sorrow, and the reason they're in sorrow is because they aren't good enough. They're not worthy. They haven't found what we would call salvation or grace. They thought that if I became a worker, it was, you know, like the golden street to heaven. You would just walk straight in. I was 5 when a sister worker had her picture taken with me, and she took my hand and I'm standing there and she says, someday we'll be companions. And the other thing that was strange was we didn't talk about Jesus very much.
Nope.
Growing up, going to conventions, I hadn't heard Jesus preached before. 2x2ism is based and rooted on a performance. It's a works-based religion, and as soon as you start preaching Jesus, now people are saved by Jesus rather than their own works. And if you take away the works, then you also take away the control. It's the only way the organization can exist.
That's exactly right. There's no need for Jesus if you can pave your own way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to understand how some people can go to meeting, claim they believe in God, and then live and make certain choices.
That's a good point.
So I think it's very possible that a lot of people aren't true believers who are in meeting. And as a professing woman, through all of those years, something I learned was this. You go to the supermarket, people turn and stare. They turn and stare. So you've already created this barrier. So that keeps women in meeting. Even when they're non-believers, it keeps women in meeting because they stay there because they want to be parents to their children.
And unfortunately, religion trumps family.
Absolutely.
The friends and workers are more important than family.
Yes.
Which, in reality, Christ is more important than family.
Mm-hmm.
However, family is designed by Christ, and he's not in the business of tearing families apart.
Right.
And so, but yeah, it's really sad that there's so much division that happens when somebody leaves, even in the nuclear family.
Yes.
Yeah.
She said, maybe you should take some time to really study that. And she said, pretend like you've never heard a worker preach. That was really good advice.
It's extremely good advice.
This is God talking to me. And he's using perfect strangers at the grocery store to walk up and say something to me out of the blue. The things that were being said, the conversations he was having with the workers, what the workers were telling him to do, and what he went through to try to earn his right back into meetings. He was divorced, remarried. He divorced his second wife for the sole reason of, I need to get back in meeting, and this is the only way they'll let me back. She went to the workers. She had them in her vehicle, and she said, we're going to go see him in the hospital. Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. And she's like, well, sorry, you're riding with me, so we're going to go see him. You need to see what you did to this man.
Hey guys, I thought this road was super cool, so I'm just going to let this video play while I tell you guys a few things. As you can tell in the preview, there's a lot covered in this interview with Lorraine. She has some pretty crazy stories to tell. Some are sad, some are horrifying, some are just weird, and some are great. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up. We cover some more maybe sensitive topics, if you will. But she has an amazing story. She actually became an atheist at 22, and I'm going to stop giving it away now. So I hope you're encouraged and enjoy this interview. Okay, so we're with Lorraine, and I drove up through the mountains, and about 2 miles down the road, a big old black bear was sitting right in the middle of the road.
Awesome.
Do you see him up here a lot?
One got our trash last night.
Yeah.
It wasn't latched.
So we live in bear country, but we've never seen him yet. So
Right.
I'm excited to see some in our place too, but that was really cool.
Yeah, they're all over here.
So we're in the mountains of Colorado, Are we northern Colorado now?
We're northern. We're very close to the Wyoming border.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to let Lorraine share a little bit of her story and go from there. So I'm just going to let you have it, and you go start wherever you want to, and then I'll ask questions when they come up, but
Okay.
we'll go from there.
Excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat a lot. I am an allergy sufferer as well.
Do you have a lot of
recovering from
pine pollen right now?
We have a lot of pollen right now. The run has started, as we're calling it. We've got beehives back here.
Oh, okay.
So they are in, I would say, full flow at this point.
Cool.
So yeah, they're making honey. It's a great place to be. We love living here, and especially out of town like this.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my own experience, and I'm going to go way back to one of my earliest memories, because all of these experiences and memories, we remember things for a reason. When we have a memory that's from age 3 that we can't let go of, it's for a reason. It's there for a lesson, and sometimes it takes 50 years to learn that lesson.
Do you have memories that popped up later in life after you left?
That's a loaded question. I actually did have one that popped up later in life after I left. A couple, actually, that were buried memories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of traumatic events, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting how your brain can do that. Like there's some times where, and I don't necessarily know specifically what they were, but like you remember things and it's like, whoa, I completely forgot that.
Yeah.
But it's probably your brain healing or whatever.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's because, and we could say that God understands that you're not ready to deal with that situation yet. So then it comes back later in life at a time when you're emotionally mature enough to deal with the situation.
Sure.
Which is good. I think it would be very harmful for us in our younger years to remember some of those things.
Yeah.
So, but one memory that I never did forget, and it was one of the memories that I took actually to my therapist. I started working with a therapist 7 or 8 years ago to deal with some of the trauma that I had experienced in 2x2ism. And I also want to say, if someone's offended by the word 2x2, it is not meant to be offensive. It's such a general term at this point. One of my very earliest memories is going to Chugwater Convention with my parents. I'm age 3. The memories of that convention they're so ingrained because it was such a big part of our year every year. You can smell, for example, I can smell the incinerator still out the back of the kitchen where we took care of the waste. And I can hear the sheets flapping on the line still in the wind. The Wyoming wind is atrocious. But I recall being in the dorms. It's late at night, it's very hushed. There's that hushed sound in the dorms. And everyone's getting ready for bed. I was 3 years old. And I'm standing there and I said to my mom, what's that feeling? And she says, what are you talking about? And I said, I have this feeling and I don't know what to call it. And she said to me, maybe you're feeling the Holy Spirit. That stayed with me for many, many years, and I equated that feeling with the Holy Spirit for many years. Much later in life, now I know what that feeling was. That feeling was sorrow. It was not joy. And it most certainly was not the Holy Spirit. I was feeling sorrow. And why a 3-year-old kid would feel sorrow in a convention dorm at convention while everyone's good, I don't know why. But the only thing that I can explain that with is that there was a collective sorrow in that room. And that's how I view 2x2ism now, is that people who are steeped in that are in sorrow. And the reason they're in sorrow is because they aren't good enough. They're not worthy. They haven't found what we would call salvation or grace. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're going to move forward.
I'll confirm that.
Sure.
That is true. When I got married, my wife, I don't remember this, but she's like, "Where's the joy in meetings?" And I'm like, well, there is no joy in the Bible. That's what she said. I said, I could have. But that is like, it's an acceptance of, and I think they play it under reverence. Like,
yeah.
I think they use that as an excuse for the way they act and the way that they, their testimony of, I didn't do good this week. Hopefully I can do better next week or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. And I think that's a good way of putting it, that there's so much sorrow and depression because you know that you'll never be good enough, but you still hope because you're in the only way that you have a chance. So you still have that hope, but deep down you know you never will be.
Yes. And that was something that we understood, even growing up in an elder's home, was that there would be, that the way was narrow. And when you're a child and you're growing up in a culture where you really don't know outsiders, you don't have relationships with them, and you don't do social activities with them. So the only people that you know are people who are going to meeting. And then to be told that the way is narrow and few there are that will find it. And now your assumption is that maybe 10% of the people you go to meeting with even are going to make it. And I know I've spoken with a lot of people since then who had this same idea, that even the people in meeting, only some of them were going to make it.
Let me just check the mics quick.
Sure.
Oh yeah, mine's on. Does yours have a green light on it?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
yes,
sorry,
it does.
okay.
That's a really depressing atmosphere for a young child to be nurtured in. So,
Did you have fear of hell as a child?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that one I'll touch on as well with my experience a little later in life.
Okay.
I absolutely had a fear of hell.
And I'll just say that you should have a healthy fear of hell in general.
Right.
But I think there was an unhealthy fear of hell.
It was,
Yeah.
because it was like it was underlying every move that you made all day long. I was aware from a very young age of what we would call sin. There were 2 old ladies in our meeting. One of them was very, very kind and compassionate, and the other one was a little sharp. And I was aware that I didn't care for the sharp one very much, and I felt condemned for that. So I think even young children are aware of feelings they have or attitudes they have that aren't right. That was before I was even in school yet. So from a very young age, and maybe that's a good thing to know, to be aware of things like that, but it's not healthy then to think that it's going to throw you into hellfire all the time. You're just fearing that all the time. I went through my childhood being encouraged, groomed to be a worker. I have to say here, that was really unhealthy for me as well. But I'll also mention the people who did it, they did it unknowingly. They thought that if I became a worker, it was, like the golden street to heaven. You would just walk straight in. I'm sure that was their thought.
I thought that too. I thought I thought that I had to become a worker in order to have enough time to read and pray and do all the things I had to do to earn my way to salvation.
Yes.
As a child, I thought that was my only chance. Like, you professed, great. Oh, shoot, I failed. You're baptized, great. Oh, shoot, I failed. The only way I have a chance is to become a worker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a real thing.
I also read a book about a woman who was a nun, And I thought at the time, wow, how perfect would that be?
Yeah.
Just to be able to read and pray all day long and, earn your way all the way.
Yeah.
But that wasn't an option in 2x2ism, but being the work was the next closest thing. The way that it was harmful was that I didn't really make plans for a future. And even though there were things that I really wanted for myself, I denied them. So I started practicing self-denial from a very young age. I was 5 when a sister worker had her picture taken with me, and she took my hand, and I'm standing there, and she says, "Someday we'll be companions." And of course, I just assumed that she was telling me the truth. She didn't mean to do harm in that situation, but it's the way it plays on a child's mind when they're raised with that in their background, all of the time. Then, when I was pretty young, we started having a rash of deaths in the state that I grew up in, which was Wyoming, of young people, over and over. It reached a point where every year I asked myself, who will die this year? And of course, this is being preached constantly, that death is being preached constantly. Death is the best thing that can happen to you. Death seemed so dark to me, because we didn't ever talk about heaven. And the other thing that was strange was we didn't talk about Jesus very much.
Nope.
I figured that out as an adult, going to a meeting. We went to a meeting down in Delta, Colorado. We were on a camping trip. There was a little old lady in that meeting who got up and talked about Jesus. And the reason that was such a strong memory to me was because it was the first time I'd ever heard it.
Isn't that crazy?
That was crazy.
Yeah.
And she was 2x2. She was professing. But it was the first time that I'd heard someone get up and preach Jesus. And it made such an impression on me. I would have been 22 years old at the time.
Wow.
So growing up, going to conventions, I hadn't heard Jesus preached before.
Looking back at it now, do you know why?
Yes. I have my own. I
want to hear what you think. Yeah.
I believe it was because 2x2ism is based and rooted on a performance. It's a works-based religion, and as soon as you start preaching Jesus, now people are saved by Jesus rather than their own works. And if you take away the works, then you also take away the control. It's the only way the organization can exist.
That's exactly right. There's no need for Jesus if you can pave your own way.
Exactly. So that was an interesting thing for me. Now, the other interesting thing that happened, however, about the same time, and I am going to talk about this because I'm hoping that this will help somebody. We, as children, were raised by parents who didn't really get into dogma like how old the earth is. It wasn't really a conversation we had. We did have this experience. My father was an avid amateur geologist.
Okay.
And he would take us out, oh, look at this rock. This is from the whatever period of time, and it's however many years old. So our family was liberal in that sense, and they didn't really preach one way or the other. But the reason this became relevant was because it became a deciding factor for me. When I was 22, same year, I went back to college again, and I took a biology class. We got to the section, it was maybe chapter 3 in the book, on evolution. And the professor said, before we even start the study of evolution, he said, I want to just say a few things to you. Number one, you can be a Christian and you can believe in evolution. Well, of course, I'm like, yeah, but you're not 2x2, you're not professing, so you don't know what you're saying. And then he said, number 2, biology is the study of evolution. And number 3, you're not going to pass this class if you don't take this chapter and study it. So my feeling has always been, I'd rather know the truth of a matter. No matter how much I'm protecting myself, I always want to know the truth of a matter. I was the one kid in the family who, a family of 6, I was the one kid in the family that if I heard a sound, I would go into the room ready to confront something rather than hide and cower and call somebody. So, and that's been my approach to life. I always want to know the truth of a matter. So that was my approach to that class. Now, I had come to a point, I was always very interested in science. I had come to a point where I believed in not only microevolution, which is where a species can have very slight changes over time, but I also believed in macroevolution. It made complete sense to me. And I also had reached a point where I felt like, okay, I think that the 24-hour cycles in creation was a symbolic somehow, or else something I don't understand yet. Since then, I've read some really interesting books written by physicists that talk about how time works. Well, time is not linear, and it actually moves both backwards and forwards, and it moves at different rates of speed all through the universe. So, but at that time, I felt like there's a missing piece here I don't understand. So I can even buy the idea that it took millions of years or even billions of years. But this was the one thing that was my holdback, and that was the self-replicating cell. So my thought was, if only God could create a self-replicating cell. Well, in that chapter on evolution, we tore down how self-replicating cells can come into existence, and it happens. Scientists took water, they moved pure water that had no contaminants in it around for X amount of time, and these little amino acids will form when you're sloshing water around. Well, that's the basis for that rises to a cell, which then becomes a self-replicating cell. So now I'm faced with this because on the one hand, I'm being told that the Bible is exactly right, and on the other hand, now I'm understanding evolution. But what I haven't been given are the tools to read the Bible properly. And what I understand now is that you cannot, number one, read the Bible through eyes of 2025 digital age people and understand it the same way the people who wrote it understood it. They were trying to convey a different meaning in many cases than the way we read it. And in order to really understand it, you can't even just you can't just read it and take a literal interpretation of it. You have to know the history behind it, the background, and no one who was 2x2 knew that.
Mm-hmm. Historical context is extremely important.
Yes.
And figures of speech at the time.
Yes.
And who it was written to, who wrote it, the time period.
Right.
All that, yeah.
Right. This was a struggle for me because at that time I didn't know that. I'm 22 and I can't talk to anybody about it. If I try to bring this up with somebody else, their answer is, you don't have the Holy Spirit with you. That seemed to be the end all to every time I had a question. So this was no help to me. As a result, I became an atheist at 22. The thing that's really hard about this, and it's confusing to understand exactly how our mind works. I became an atheist. I no longer believed in God. But there were two things that I did still believe in. What I'll say is this: you believe in what you have seen. It's difficult to believe in something you haven't seen. So the two things I believed in 2x2ism. What I saw of 2x2ism was that it was indeed a perfect way, because people who are 2x2 never became addicted to drugs. They never smoked. They never drank. So right now they're already, living a very healthy life. So it works, right? It works.
That now probably that's not a true statement, but that's what your thoughts were.
That's what I believed then. I knew that people who were 2x2 had children who grew up to be completely normal people. They all got good jobs. They always found a spouse. They always got married and had children and lived a very upright life. Everything was perfect for people who were 2x2. So I believed in 2x2ism.
So you kept going to meetings?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I believed in was hell. Nothing that I had studied gave me any indication that there was not something that came after. But if you don't believe in God anymore, you can't believe in heaven.
But you can still believe in hell?
But you can still believe in hell.
Interesting.
You can still believe in a dark, ugly, underworld where souls go that are disembodied, who no longer have the ability to communicate with other people or live a life or smell or taste. Yeah, I could believe in hell still. And that was a horrible, horrible thing for me. This catapulted me into severe depression. And I also developed what I later came to understand as panic attack syndrome, although I don't know that that's really a actual psychological term. Many years later, my therapist diagnosed me with PTSD. I went through years of having extreme, extreme anxiety, waking up at 2 a.m. with my heart just racing. I would have panic attacks every time I tried to comprehend something that was a little bit beyond my ability to comprehend. The really sad thing was there were things I wanted to understand. I kept studying more and more about science, for one. Now I'm glad I did. One of the books I read was A Brief History of Time, really an interesting book. I read some other books written by physicists. I also read a lot of ancient literature from where I learned about things like gods of the Mesopotamian gods, the Canaanite gods, Egyptian gods. I wanted to know. I wanted to know where we came from, who we are, why do we exist. And I didn't have anyone to talk to, so I buried myself in books. So this was
in your early 20s still?
This lasted many years.
Okay.
This period of time lasted many, many years. I would say maybe 15 years.
Okay.
Of time when I just buried myself in this type of study. Now, one thing that was underlying through all of this as well was my concern that the reason I didn't believe was something wrong with my own heart. And of course, we're told this. Mm-hmm. Oh, the reason they don't believe is because they've got something wrong with their heart. So even though I was atheist, I still would say, what if? What if the reason I'm a non-believer is because there's something wrong with my heart? So I would pray. Please help me see what is true. And that was what I prayed all the time. Help me see what is true.
Were you willing for the answer when you started praying that?
I was always willing to know what truth was.
Okay. If
truth was God, glory, hallelujah. But I couldn't see it because that didn't agree with my understanding of what the Bible said. And the other interesting thing about all of this is that although I could study all of these things, the one thing I couldn't do, because it wasn't allowed, was I couldn't pick up a book about the Bible. Mm-hmm. Had I simply picked up a book about the Bible, someone who says, hey, this is the historical context here, it would have started clicking for me rather quickly, but that was simply not allowed. So I didn't reach out to any other resources. What does the Bible mean? One thing that was a turning point for me would have been, I'm trying to remember exactly how many years ago this was now, and I think it was about 12 years ago. There was a man who had married a woman who was 2x2. I knew what his beliefs were, I think. I knew what his beliefs were.
He wasn't 2x2.
He was not. He was not raised 2x2, had no family connections to 2x2ism. And he was an agnostic and respected religion as a force that could help keep people in line.
Okay.
So he didn't have a disrespect for
religion. Which is what religion is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but let's just be very clear. It was very clear this man would never come to meeting. He would never come to meeting. He had made that clear himself. And I had known him very, very well my entire life. He was older than me, a generation. So I said, God, I'm going to pray for a sign. I'm going to pray for the sign. I'm going to pray it every night. And I did. For a full year, I prayed every night. This man will start coming to meetings. That's going to be my sign that you are out there. 1 year after I started praying this, my mom and dad called me up and they said, you'll never believe what just happened. What just happened? They said, well, so-and-so brought his camper to convention, and he stayed for the whole thing, and he listened. They had a speaker or something that he could listen. They said he showed up for convention, and I was like gobsmacked, just absolutely gobsmacked, because I thought to myself, this is the sign. Now, it's worth pointing out that he came to meeting for many years. I don't know what his stance is now. I haven't asked him. If he watches this video, he's going to know who I'm talking about. He didn't ever profess. He came to meetings. He supported his wife. Now, I don't know if he went to Sunday morning meeting, Wednesday. I don't know what all he did, but he came to conventions. I saw him there. I do feel like that was an answered prayer. And that was a turning point for me when I started saying maybe there is something out there.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around how, as an atheist, you still went to meetings, but I guess it was just so ingrained. And God is somewhat absent in meetings. I mean,
yeah,
in a way, because of, I mean, they use some of the same terms as we do as Christians,
right?
But it's different. So it's not about God; it's about the religion. So I can understand how that played out. Okay, so you still believe you're starting to question now. What age was that at?
When I start to question whether or not God exists,
when this man went to convention and you're
same time. So I was around 40.
Okay.
38, 39, 40 years old.
Okay.
I'm going to just go back and point out one other thing about continuing to go to meetings, even though I was an atheist. Firstly, I believe a lot of people have done this. I believe a lot of people have done this simply by by their own actions. It's hard for me to understand how some people can go to meeting, claim they believe in God, and then live and make certain choices.
That's a good point.
So I think it's very possible that a lot of people aren't true believers who are in meeting.
I think that is the majority. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's common. But the other thing I'll point out is that women in meetings, this is changing a little bit, but at the time that I was going to meetings, I was married. I had 3 children. I didn't have a career. I did work. I've always worked, but what I did for work was I worked for my husband. I knew full well that if I wasn't working for my husband, his entire company would collapse. It really was a partnership in that sense. How would we provide for our children? And this was my experience. A woman who doesn't believe, who quits coming to meeting, is subsequently divorced by her husband. I had known multiple cases of this. It simply didn't work. Now, I knew cases of men who quit coming to meetings and their wives were able to continue to be faithful to their husbands, but it was extremely common. And by the way, when I did leave, I warned my husband before I left, this is what's going to happen. You'll go to meeting, people will feel sorry for you, they will express their sympathy, you will start to feel like a victim because your wife has quit coming to meetings. This will become a bone of contention between us because you will start to understand that I have victimized you in some way. That's what happens when a woman quits coming.
What was his response?
I don't remember what his response was, but let's just say it was a hard year, the year that I left and he was in.
I have personal experience in this. It was about a year, same thing. My wife didn't grow up going to meetings, but she did. I forced her to stand up. She never took part or anything, but so I went through that too. I think that's pretty impressive that you gave him the heads up on that and you had the foresight to see that.
Yeah.
Because that is reality.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
I felt like that would help head it off a little bit so that he would recognize it when it happened.
Yeah.
And I'd seen it too many times. The next thing I had seen was that as soon as the man divorced the wife, she lost custody of her children. And of course she did, because firstly, she had no friends outside to testify on her behalf. Her only friends were inside. I knew that the 2x2s would support whichever spouse was staying in, to the point that I even knew of a case where a woman wrote a letter to the courts in support of her husband's sister's ex over her husband's sister. Why? Because we believe that if those children stayed with the husband's sister who had left meetings, that they were hellbound. So of course you did. You would support people that weren't even your family.
And that still happens today very much.
It does.
And probably more frequently now because a lot of people are leaving.
Yes. And it's a very real concern that women in some of the ex-supports groups have brought up. If I leave meetings, I need to be out, but if I leave, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it does. And they don't have any foot to stand on when they go to court because they don't have a job. They don't have most of them don't have an education. They are very, very much trapped. And they go to the court, and the next thing that happens is they show up looking like a professing woman. The husband shows up looking like any Joe Blow. People don't trust someone who doesn't look like them. And as a professing woman, through all of those years, something I learned was this. You go to the supermarket, people turn and stare. They turn and stare. So you've already created this barrier. I found in business, I had a really hard time when I tried to step foot out the doors of my husband's office and do business around town. People would look at me like, who are you? And they make this assumption you're dressed like a woman from wherever or whenever. They make an assumption that you aren't intelligent. So, and that you're incapable. And guess what? You do look like that. A woman like that looks like, in fact, they're a target. They're a target to be a victim because they look like the kind of a woman who is very submissive, who won't open her mouth up and say anything. So that keeps women in meeting. Even when they're non-believers, it keeps women in meeting because they stay there because they want to be parents to their children.
And unfortunately, religion trumps family.
Absolutely.
The friends and workers are more important than family.
Yes.
Which, in reality, Christ is more important than family. However, family is designed by Christ, and he's not in the business of tearing families apart.
Right.
And so, but yeah, it's really sad that there's so much division that happens when somebody leaves, even in the nuclear family.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I concluded when I finally left. I started having this struggle, and I finally opened up to my mom. Only person in the world I felt comfortable opening up to. Because, of course, when you open up to someone, you're also risking their own salvation.
Yeah.
So you don't tell them your own concerns or questions. On top of the being labeled with you don't have the Spirit with you. But my mom was someone that always accepted me. She didn't always agree with me and still doesn't. We have some rousing conversations still. Mother, if you watch this, I apologize for that. But she is the one person in my life that is the constant that I know I can talk to.
And she still goes to meetings?
No.
She does not? Okay.
She doesn't.
Okay, sorry if I ruined your story.
Don't worry. No, for me, that's like, I am so overjoyed by that.
Yeah, amen.
So I started talking to my mom, and one thing that I loved about the conversations we had was that she never told me, Lorraine, you're wrong. She never said, Lorraine, you don't have the Holy Spirit. She said, I can see where reading the Bible literally without literacy is a problem. And she said, why don't you take some time to really study the Bible, especially, she said, the Gospels. She said, maybe you should take some time to really study that. And she said, pretend like you've never heard a worker preach. That was really good advice.
It's extremely good advice. And I would add, get a new Bible when you do it.
I did. I got an ESV version. I compared, and I realized the King James Version did not disagree with what the ESV said. But the ESV made it a lot easier to comprehend. I was, with the King James Version, literally, do you remember learning how to diagram sentences in 8th grade? I did that with the King James. I started diagramming sentences, and that helped me to understand a few things. For example, the hair requirement. And when I diagrammed the sentences, I said, wait a minute, Paul wasn't saying women wear your hair long. He was saying, this is an example of why a woman should have her hair covered. He wasn't saying, because at that time it was immodest for the women to go into church without a veil on. He was telling them they needed to wear a veil. So that was one of my first experiences with diagramming sentences with the King James Version. But then I got the ESV version, and that really helped a lot. So I started reading it. I started to understand that it said something exactly opposite what we'd been taught in meetings. What do you do with that? And then the next thing that happens is, and I won't get into all of these experiences, I had a rash of very, very strange experiences that I will take as signs that I didn't ask for. Over and over, something would happen. Someone would be sent into my life at exactly the right time and say exactly the most interesting thing in the world to me. That had never happened. I had had this experience of living in our community for 25 years, and no one approaching me at the supermarket and saying like this little thing to me, and what a strange experience that was to have and I felt this is God talking to me. And he's using perfect strangers at the grocery store to walk up and say something to me out of the blue. So, yeah, just a lot of really weird stuff happened. One other thing that was interesting, my aunt had gone into the work when I was 12 or 13 years old. She'd been in Venezuela. She had gifted me her Bible. When she went into the work, she got a new Bible. She gifted me her old Bible. And that had been something really special to me. I'd hung on to it. I still have it. I took my oldest son to New York City, his senior year. We went to Wednesday night meeting.
Of course you did, because you had to.
Of course we did. We stepped off the subway, and he said to me, Mom, where's the Bible bags? And I said, I thought you had them. We ran back to the subway. We went up and down the entire train, and they were gone, completely gone. We went and filed a report, described them, said what was in them, and why somebody would take Bible bags. I mean, they're so obviously not handbags with money in it. Everyone in the world knows what a Bible bag looks like. So they were gone. They were just simply gone. I'll come back to that. Remember that I brought this story up. It was another one of those very strange occurrences. In that Bible, I had my maiden name written. I still had my old hymn book, my old Bible. I had my maiden name written all over the place, even though I was at that point close to 40 years old. So how in the world? Anyway, it didn't have my legal name, didn't say where I lived, nothing. There was no identifying information in it other than my maiden name. So anyway, let's fast forward now. I am at this point where I am really, really struggling. And one of the things that happens is we bought a house up in Laramie, Wyoming, and it needed remodeled. My middle son was going to college up there, and we started going up there for the weekends. My middle son had quit going to meetings. And go ahead.
This is interesting because it's a perspective of parent and their child stops going when you're still going. How did you feel when that happened? And
yes, let me make this clear. I took my two older sons aside and I said to them, don't do this for me. I didn't tell them I didn't believe in it, but I said, make your own choices. When my older son and my middle son quit going, I felt absolutely no sorrow. I was glad. I didn't know where they were going to end up. I didn't know what was going to happen in their lives, but I couldn't help but feel like I had been raised in something very, very dark, and I wanted them to not be part of it.
Interesting. How many years ago about was this?
When my middle son was in college, he's going to be turning 24 this month. And he graduated young. He was 17 when he graduated, but he turned 18 shortly after. So it would have been 6 years ago.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but this was still a few years before you left.
Correct. Yeah. I left 3 years ago. So 3 years before I left, we're up there. We're working on the house every weekend. It's only 2 hours from here. So we would get up there and we would have Saturday with them, and then it would roll around Sunday and we would go off to meeting. And I said to my husband, I feel really weird about this. I said, we're coming up here to see our son who has just left home. And then we leave him Sunday to go hang out with these other people. And we knew these other people and we cared about them. But some of them we didn't know. And I'm like, something about this feels really off. Like I'm walking away from my own child to go spend Sunday with other people I don't really have a real relationship with for the most part. And I said, that just really bothers me. And I said, would there be anything wrong with making the decision to not go to meeting every time we're up here? And curiously, my husband agreed with me because we've always loved our kids more than we loved meeting.
That's good.
So we started going to meeting like every other week. And then the weird thing that happened was, I wish I could include more in my story here, but I can't include it all.
I have 7 hours and 46 minutes left on the card, so.
You would have to edit so much stuff out to get this to a watchable size. I'll just put this little blurb in here too. I am convinced that before I was born, God had a conversation with me and said, what are you looking for in life? And I'm convinced that I said, I want something really interesting because I'm telling you, I have had the most fascinating life. So COVID hits. And something that happened right away, of course, was, what do you do about meeting? Well, some places had like their little insular meetings where these couples were assigned to this meeting and only these people could go to that meeting. That was one way of handling the spread. Fair enough. But now we're going to Laramie, and then on top of that, there is this very, very strong wall. It's invisible, but it's between Wyoming and Colorado. It's there both among the 2x2s. Workers do not cross that border because Colorado is an apostate state. And people in Wyoming also make nasty, nasty comments about people with green license plates all the time. It's such a division. So there's already this already exists. And I know from experience of going to school in Wyoming myself many years ago that the Friends have a little bit of an attitude towards the kids from Colorado coming up to go to school in Wyoming. I feel weird. I'm uncomfortable. They're not saying anything, but I'm wondering, are they angry when we pull up to go to meeting here?
Because at that point you lived in Colorado
we were here, going back there, and I feel like there might be some concern that, oh yeah, these Coloradans are bringing COVID across the border. Because also COVID recognizes borders. I don't know if you know that. Even COVID is stopped at the border. And it's true, Wyoming didn't have a very big outbreak, but that might have something to do with the average distance between humans. So that was when I said to Steve, we just can't go to meeting while we're here. It was interesting the effect it had on our family. It was like very, very soon. I'm not telling about a lot of other things that happened in our young years or even raising our family, but we had been through trauma and we needed to heal, and getting away from meetings is when the healing started. So COVID lasted a long time. There were quite a few months with no meetings, and during that time, we just had a freedom and also freedom to talk. And I feel like Steve and I became very close during that time in a way we hadn't been close before. And we'd always been close, but when it came to meetings, of course, you didn't question things even with your own spouse, or at least we didn't.
Yeah, you didn't talk about anything really.
No.
When it came to things that matter.
Yeah. So other Christian couples I know would pray together. No, not 2x2 couples. They don't go to their bedroom and have a conversation and pray together. They don't do that. Mm-hmm. So Steve and I started having some conversations, and of course we're making these trips back and forth to Wyoming. We've got our youngest kid in the truck with us. I'm very sorry for what COVID did to a lot of families. It devastated a lot of families. I lost several friends to it. And one of the friends that I lost was right here, went to meeting, young mother with one child, one little girl who was left with no mother. And that was a tough experience. Another thing I'll mention was that by the time we lost her, I had decided I couldn't be in meetings anymore. Now, I had this other experience several years ago where someone I was close to had been horrifically spiritually abused. And I knew about it. I knew the play-by-play because his sister would call me. And this was an older man. His sister would call me and tell me the things that were being said, the conversations he was having with the workers, what the workers were telling him to do, and what he went through to try to earn his right back into meetings. He was divorced, remarried. He divorced his second wife for the sole reason of, I need to get back in meeting, and this is the only way they'll let me back. He attempted suicide. We didn't know at the time it was a suicide attempt. We found out later because he told his sister. I had decided this was the easiest way to go. He had a medical condition that is a very common medical condition, and you just need to take medication every day for it. The easiest way to die, stop taking the medication, and it will kill you very quickly. We found out after the first time that he attempted that was actually a suicide attempt. We thought it was an accident. He forgot to take his medicine. The second suicide attempt, he admitted it to his sister. She was absolutely livid. She went to the workers. She had them in her vehicle, and she said, we're going to go see him in the hospital. Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. And she's like, well, sorry, you're riding with me, so we're going to go see him. You need to see what you did to this man. The third attempt was successful. The reason I knew it was a suicide the third time was because he had done it twice before, and he had stated, this is what I'll do. And the third time when it happened, it was right after he had had a conversation with the workers. He'd had a conversation with the workers. They had come down on him. He had divorced his second wife. He went back to the workers and he said, can I please take part in meeting again? And they said, well, now you need to prove yourself. So I felt like already proven himself by divorcing his wife. When I got the phone call that he was gone, nobody said how he went. Nobody called it a suicide. But I knew. And I told Steve then, I will never set foot in meetings again. This was the final straw for me. I had known of too many very serious spiritual abuse cases, including one committed against myself, that I had just suffered, lived with it, and shut up. But this time it was too far. And I said, I'm done.
How long ago was this?
Well, this was long before I actually left.
Okay.
This was a number of years ago. And I need to be careful how much I say because he has children and there's a lot of pain there. Steve said to me, don't make a rash decision when you're upset. He said, take some time and really think this over. I'm glad he said that because what happened then was that was my couple of year period when I started really reading the Bible and really searching, and I found what I was looking for. And what I found, like I mentioned, was that 2x2ism was completely 180 degrees from what the Bible said. And that was such a revelation to me because here I'd been taught all the time, 2x2s are the only ones who follow the Bible. They're the only ones who follow Jesus. And that's when I started to really clue in on, no, actually they are 100% opposite. My decision was made to leave meetings, and I was going to leave, and then this young woman in our meeting passed away. You talk about bad timing. You know, you don't leave meetings right then. You don't announce this thing. So I didn't leave. I stayed for that. We have a very small meeting here, so I was one of a couple, just a very tiny group of women who could do things like plan the dinner and so on. And I wasn't going to leave people hanging and hit them with two blows at once. So I said nothing. We went to the funeral on a Saturday. I had bought tickets to a comedy show in Denver for Steve for his birthday. It had been put off and put off and put off because of COVID, and things were finally opening up again. They shouldn't have been. We had people dying from it at that point. But the vaccine was out, and Steve and I had both been vaxxed. And I think that was maybe one of the requirements for a lot of those public events. You had to be vaxxed. So we went to the funeral, and as soon as the funeral was over, the dinner was over, the cleanup was done, Steve and I got in the car. We headed to Denver. We went to the comedy show. That was so ironic, and in one way it felt wrong, and in another way, it was we needed it so badly. We needed it so badly. Very clean comedy. Jeff Dunham and his puppets, really cute, funny. And that was the end of meetings for me. I never went back. Now, people didn't know this because at the time, again, we were still going to Laramie quite a bit, but what they didn't know was that I had asked Steve if he wanted to check out another church here in town. I don't think they realized that on Sundays when they thought we were in Laramie, we were going to a different church in Steamboat.
When I left, I had asked the overseer if I could go to a different meeting because I don't remember the reason why. Anyway, so we had basically 2 meetings we could go to, and so it was convenient to we're just at the other meeting. Really quick, I wanted to ask you though, because I don't know what happened, and maybe you're getting to there, but at what point did you believe God existed again? And if you were in your early 20s when you became an atheist, what happened? When did that happen?
So that happened when I started actually believing God. And the next thing I'm going to say here, I want to say one more thing about that. When I use the term God, there are a lot of people who have been so hurt by religion that the word God even is triggering to them. And I just want to say, from my point of view, I am completely comfortable with saying the universe or a higher power. There are people who will say, no, that's New Agey and that's not Jesus. I think it's perfectly okay to say that, and I think it's perfectly okay to meet people where they're at. So when you started believing in God again, I am comfortable saying the word God, and I think that's because I'm healed. So yeah, I started really believing in God, and I'll tell you when this happened. Because it wasn't until I made my pronouncement. So we go to the show, we're going to another church, and in the back of my mind, I know that I need to make this public. My birthday was in February. I, at age 40, started giving myself very meaningful gifts for my birthday every year. And age 40 was the gift to eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. That was a big one. And the reason I gave it to myself was because I really didn't like pancakes or waffles or donuts. I liked eggs and beef and green beans. And so I would eat beef stew for breakfast if I wanted. That was a silly one, but it was,
Okay.
But when I was close to leaving meetings, the gift that I gave to myself, because they got better, that first one was silly, but they got better and better. The gift I gave to myself was, I am going to write my exit letter, and I'm going to send it. I'm going to make this public. That was my gift to myself. It took me 2 weeks to get that letter written. It turned out to be 27 pages before I was finished.
It took me over a year to write mine, so 2 weeks is pretty good.
But I'd been thinking about it, for a long time. And my exit letter was, this is why I'm going. I want everyone to know that I'm not leaving because of offense or someone do it. I don't want anyone to sit there crying, wondering what they could have done differently. Nothing. I said, these are the Bible verses that support why I don't agree with 2x2ism. This is who I believe Jesus is. Whether someone believes in him or not, you can't argue with the fact that the Bible makes it very, very clear that Jesus is God. So I said, I can't be part of a church that claims to be the only right way in the world when the act of stating that you are the only right way in the world immediately disqualifies you from being right at all.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wrote my exit letter. I sent my exit letter. And that's when I had an experience that I will say was baptism by the Holy Spirit. You read about this, and I didn't have no flame of fire appeared on my head, but I can tell you exactly where it happened. And what was meaningful about that was that I'd had another spiritual experience in that exact same place that was a very negative, very dark one. So then to have been in that exact same place again, kind of a random spot on the road, and it suddenly come over me that I am saved. And I was giddy. I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? That's when it suddenly hit me. I don't need to do all of this stuff. This stuff is just chains, and it keeps people from really seeing the truth.
Amen.
So it was an amazing moment for me. There's this question of rebaptism has come up by a number of people, and I respect it, and it's very meaningful to a lot of people to be rebaptized. But for me, rebaptism would be negating that experience that I had. And so I've chosen to not rebaptize by water because that experience was so profound. It happened within days of me sending out my exit letter. I can't tell you the exact date. I'm going to say within 3 days. Now, the other thing that was really strange.
Do you think part of that was because you let go? Like that was your final letting go?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I also think that people actually have to make a statement. I think they actually do have to make like if you will, a public pronouncement. I think it is very much that you can't just bottle things up inside and hide them.
Jesus says to proclaim me publicly.
Yeah.
He says, if you deny me publicly, I'll deny you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I needed to do was, and then the other thing I'll bring up, the fear factor. There is a verse in Revelations about all of the people who will be thrown into the lake of fire. I like to think there's not very many people that get thrown in. I like to think that's mostly Satan and his minions or whatever those things are. But there's a list of entities, if you will, because it's not only human, that go there. And it's some pretty horrible things, but one of them is fearful. I always wondered about that. Like, how could you be blamed for being afraid? That's what it means. People who are fearful won't take that step forward. Mm-hmm. They're fearful of what their friends are going to say about them. They're fearful of losing all of their social connections, their family. That's what it means.
And we know that better than others because we were a part of that to some extent at some point in our lives of excommunicating somebody who had left. Mm-hmm. So we knew what was going to happen. And I think that's probably what makes it so hard to leave, even after coming to the truth, biblically, is knowing what's going to happen next. And it is scary. Mm-hmm. But it is, you ask everybody, except for one person that I know of, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
And that person, it's just been recent and they're really struggling still. But that happens too. I mean, that's going to happen. But yeah, fear is a real thing.
It's a real thing. And it's more binding, I think, than anything else. So I had that moment. Now, the next thing that was so strange that happened just a couple days after that, I get this message on Facebook Messenger. Hey, you don't know me. I own this art complex. I didn't understand the entire thing. It's like a art venue that supports both showings of art as well as, it sounds like maybe they also have theatrical productions. So like an all-encompassing art venue. It's in upstate New York. She says, we are working on doing a bunch of moving, and I'm cleaning out some old storage rooms, and I found a box, and this box has a bag in it. And she said, I had a really hard time picking it up and looking in it because she says, I recognized this from my childhood. She says, I was raised in what I will now call a cult, a very restricted religious household, very restricted religion. And she said, I saw that and I knew immediately what it was. And she says, but I had to open it. She said, I opened it. I found a Bible. The Bible has a name, Lorraine Cronk, in it. She said, I'm wondering if this belongs to you. Why would this happen after all these years? So I verified, yeah, it was mine. She said, I'm going to send it to you if you want it. I said, yeah, send it to me. Sorry. So I don't know why it took that many years and why it happened that same week that I left. But I took that as another sign of, you were mishandling this book. It wasn't good for you to read this book. You were taking stuff out of it that it was never meant to mean, and doing bad things with your life and making bad choices, and even bringing harm to other people because it was someone to take it away from you. Just disappeared, and somehow it traveled from the subway in New York City to upstate New York and reappeared.
Years later.
Years later. This happened when my son was 17. My oldest son was 17 when this happened. And so 3 years ago, he's 30, so it was gone for year 17 to year 27. 10 years. It was gone for 10 years. Oh, the other interesting thing about that was that it was so close to the date when we'd actually been there. We were there in February, so it was my birthday. And then it was Blues Week, President's Day week, when the kids were off, that we went to New York. So it was almost exactly 10 years to the date.
And so she had messaged you after you had already left meetings.
Yeah.
But shortly after you had... Okay, so the camera shut off from heat again, so...
Okay.
We'll try again.
So the Bible came back to me from New York, and that was very interesting. And then a couple of other things happened. About the same time, I knew that I was going to need to have a lot of support in my decision because my husband was staying in. And I was determined that this wouldn't destroy our marriage. So I knew my support needed to come from outside. I was going to need a lot of encouragement. And I needed to avoid causing contention in our relationship over my decision. So I immediately joined a couple of ex-support groups. One of them had just started. And that's that's the big group, the X2x2 support group that's on Facebook.
Okay.
And I think I was number 29.
Okay, so early on.
It was early on. When someone said, hey, we're starting this group, do you want to join? I said yes. I knew I had to be completely out. I was exploring these groups at the same time that I was writing my exit letter. And I needed to put my exit letter out first before I joined a group. Because as soon as you join a group, the gossip among 2x2s, someone was going to say something.
So-and-so just joined.
So I sent my exit letter. I only sent it to a few people who I felt really needed to receive it. And that was my parents, my husband's parents, and then two of the families in our meeting. I figured everyone else could reach out to me if they wanted to know. Otherwise, no one else. I didn't need to send it to other people. So I joined those support groups, and that was a huge help to me. It was very healing because not only could we discuss experiences that we'd had, traumas we've been through, we could also discuss things like which workers we really did, really did like and we had fun with. And we could talk about things like recipes that seem to be endemic to 2x2s. And we could also make fun of a few things and laugh about a few things. It was really helpful.
Healing.
It was very. But one thing that happened shortly after, Steve and I are in Laramie, and he's in bed. I'm scrolling on my phone because I do that sometimes. I'm, very much a modern woman who scrolls on her phone in bed. And I'm on the Facebook support group, and this story comes up about this guy named Dr. Baldwin. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The reason this struck a chord with...
Had plenty of time to cool off.
Okay.
Okay, so camera died again. If you've watched any of my interviews, you know it happens all the time. But we were talking about Dr. Baldwin, so we'll pick up there.
So this was my experience with learning about Dr. Baldwin. My first child was born out of wedlock, as we say among 2x2s. And I was 20 when I had him, 19 when I got pregnant. And the father of my son was my fiance. We were very young. We were very much in love, but there were a lot of strange constraints being placed on our relationship. And something that I don't understand to this day, there were a number of young couples engaged in Laramie, Wyoming, where we were going to college. And for some reason, their relationships were accepted, promoted, supported. But when I told the workers that we were engaged, they were very against it.
Was he professing?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm married to him now.
Okay.
He grew up in a 2x2 home in Colorado. He had an uncle in the work. He had a cousin in the work. His parents both professed. There was, as far as pedigree goes, perfectly clear pedigree.
So did they tell you why?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't understand it. Looking back, since so many years have passed, there are a number of things that I have concluded. One of them, he was from Colorado. I was from Wyoming. I mentioned that before. Colorado was apostate. There were people who said that the head worker of Colorado was a false prophet. Now, to be clear, that head worker, as it turns out, was a perpetrator. I would say, yeah, he was a false prophet, but no more than anybody else at the time, and nobody knew this at the time either. So I don't understand why it wasn't okay for us to be together. The other thing that I considered is that this idea that I should be a worker had followed me. It continued to follow me even when I was in college. People would say little things to me. And I think there was an expectation that I would go into the work, as well as an expectation that no Wyoming girl would marry a boy from Colorado. And I think ultimately that those are probably the two reasons that it wasn't supported. On top of that, our parents really weren't in favor of it either. I couldn't tell you why they weren't. I don't know now if we were having a conversation with them today, if they would say, they might just simply say, because you were so young. And I respect that now that I'm 50. I respect that 19 is very, very young to be engaged.
I got married at 19. We both were.
So, I don't know what all really was going on there, and nobody was ever very clear to it, but there was a lot of pushback against us getting married. And then the really sad thing was that someone was so upset about it that they took, I don't know how the story got back to Steve, but they completely maligned my character. And this caused a breakup in our relationship. The problem was I was pregnant. So throughout my entire pregnancy, and this is another one of those things I won't get into every detail with, but throughout my entire pregnancy, the workers decided that I could not have this child because I wasn't married. And there were multiple meetings between myself and a specific sister worker who told me that I had to give my child up. She told me that I wouldn't be allowed to continue professing if I didn't agree to give my child up. My parents finally stepped in and informed her that that there was absolutely no way. They said if she gives her child up, we will take the child. But the sister worker had someone pegged to adopt my child. We don't know who that person was. We suspect it was one of her family members. And so she harassed me throughout the pregnancy.
Was this the worker in your field at the time?
Curiously, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know that at one point she was not in my field. I believe she may have been in the field of my aunt and uncle, and I spent the summer at their house.
Okay.
So that is possibly why, but I will also say that multiple times she crossed the field line to be involved in my life. I had told her at one point, God gave me this child. If he wanted someone else to have this child, he would have given this child to why is it in me? And I said, how do I know that whoever took him will take care of him or keep taking him to meeting? And she said, well, you don't know that you yourself will. She excommunicated me using the verses that at the time I didn't understand exactly what they meant, but it was a verse in Corinthians, and any 2x2 watching this will know which verses I'm talking about, where there was the man who had taken his father's wife for himself. And the people in the church group in that area had accepted this and continued to meet with him and have a relationship with him. And Paul wrote to them and said, you can't keep company with this man. This situation is so deplorable, you can't keep company with him. So these were the verses used as the reason why I was being excommunicated. Now, I thought that it simply meant I couldn't take part in meeting, and I accepted that because I understand that a church is going to have these expectations and rules, and if you aren't in compliance, I understand you can't stand up and take part and have a part where you might be teaching other people. I understand that. I could accept that. What I couldn't accept was when I said, what about the bread and wine? And they said, you also will not be taking the bread and wine. Because at that moment I knew what they were saying was, I'm no longer saved. That's what refusal of bread and wine means. And it means that in every single church. Mm-hmm. If you take it away, it's an excommunication. It's not just taking away your part. It's taking away salvation.
Because they have the right to do that.
They have the right to do that in that church. Or I should say in that sect. So the bread and wine has been taken away from me. And at this point, I am incredibly fearful. And I know that all I have to do to get it back is agree that I'm going to give my baby up. I believed that I was choosing hell or the risk of hell in order to keep my child, and I did it. It was an incredibly fearful time for me. Throughout that entire pregnancy, I was terrified of dying. I mentioned earlier that there had been a rash of deaths of young people in our area, people I was close to. One young boy was from our own meeting, and every meeting in the area had lost somebody. So this was very real in my mind, that anytime I get in a car and go down the road, I could die. The interesting thing was that during that pregnancy, I was involved in a car accident, the worst car accident I've ever been in. I was riding with someone, and she lost control of the truck on a loose gravel road and rolled the truck. And we were airborne for 50 to 100 feet, landed on the top. It was a pretty horrific accident.
Wow.
And so that stayed with me, that this is exactly what is going to happen to you. Something's going to happen, you're going to die, and you're going to hell because you chose to keep your child. I did believe the workers had the right to take that away from me.
So that was one of the things when I left, was facing the... Now, I knew that it wasn't reality deep down, but since we're so ingrained in, if you leave, you're going to hell, mm-hmm. That was one of the things that I was faced with too. Like, if I stay married and continue and leave meetings, then I could be going to hell. And this is when you were young, mm-hmm. So I can't even imagine. Like, I knew deep down that wasn't the reality for me, but I still had the thought process.
Yes.
But for you, I can't even imagine.
I was still entrenched in it at that point. Mm-hmm. I still believed in it. Mm-hmm. This was before I went through the period of atheism and non-atheism.
Okay.
So it was a pretty dark time for me. I was pretty afraid. Just the year before that, Velma Feilner had been murdered. So that was also another thing that was very real, that even a servant of God can be murdered. I was in a very bad place, very alone. There were the kids that I had formerly been friends with. There were around 30 young people in Laramie going to school. They didn't reach out to me. They didn't invite me. They would get together for game night or whatever. I wasn't included.
Do you think they were instructed not to?
I don't know. I don't know if they were instructed not to, Or if it was a matter of, when people are young and and they're not emotionally mature and they don't know how to handle a situation, it's also possible that they simply didn't know what to say. What I will say about that was that there was one older couple in Laramie, Leslie and Elizabeth Prince, and I always have to give them credit. They invited me for Sunday lunch over and over and over during that time. And so I kept going to meetings, sat there, didn't take part. The bread and wine was passed around me. But they would invite me, and I have to give them credit for that, for them really reaching out and taking care of me in that way. It was like a mark of, we are standing behind you in a way that nobody else did.
That's good. Yeah.
They're gone now. I wish I could say that to them today. But I didn't understand it. I was also emotionally immature at the time. So I had that experience. There were a lot of really difficult things that happened, and I don't know if this is really the right venue for talking about that. For the things that I faced and the things that I faced with that sister worker. There were some kind of creepy things that happened, scary things that happened. There was definitely a push to even involve the authorities to have my child taken away from me. The CPS was keeping an eye on me and insisting on weekly visits.
So did the workers or somebody inform them?
I believe they did.
I mean, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you have CPS coming.
Exactly. It was after he was born.
Okay.
I was a good kid. I was going to school on a full ride scholarship. I had never drank alcohol in my life. I had never been that person. And from anyone's perspective, I was an incredibly responsible human being. So there's no reason why CPS would have been checking me out after my child was born, coming and banging on the door, wanting to do home inspections. It was very intrusive. So, yes, I believe that this sister worker informed. There was also one other really strange incident that I will bring up. When he was an infant and I went home to my parents' house and she was not in their field, I had told the elders of my meeting that I was going to be at my parents' that weekend, because you always informed where you would be. And so through the grapevine, it would have been entirely possible for her to know where I was that weekend.
Sure.
My parents were surprised because they get this phone call just a little bit before meeting that she's going to be in our meeting and she's going to have an extra. She wasn't in their field. So it was a very curious thing that she shows up and my mom said it was her mother. I don't remember. But my mom says it was the sister worker with her mother, not the sister worker with her sister.
Okay.
Meeting is over, and the sister worker's mother says, I want to see the baby. It never occurs to me that I can tell her no, because this is the sister worker, and this is the sister worker's mother. She's got power over me. So I hand her my infant child. She goes into the bedroom and closes the door. And I'm like, what is she doing? And I was so afraid. And I went to my mom and I said to my mom, she just took Tanner, my son. She went into the bedroom and closed the door. I said, I'm really afraid. What is she doing to him? I'm really scared. And my mom's like, she takes me and she's like, wake up. That's your child. You don't ever let a stranger, I don't care who it is, you do not let a stranger take your child, go into a room and close the door. So I go and I open the door. She has my baby on the bed. All of his blankets are unwrapped. She has his shirt off, his pants off. She's taking his diaper off. She's examining him. Why is she examining my child's nude body? At that moment, I was certain it was because she was looking for any kind of a mark, a diaper rash, anything that she could then call the authorities with.
This was the worker that did that?
Her mother.
Or her mom. Okay.
Her mother. So, and my mom, for some reason, has it in her head that it was the sister worker's sister that wanted my child. So it's a family thing, the sister worker's family is involved in this.
I just want to say it's absolutely horrible.
It's bizarre.
And all in the name of religion.
Yes.
And appearances.
Yes.
Because the religion requires appearances.
Yes.
It's just mind-blowing.
At this point, I've had the baby. I've gone through the pregnancy. I've sat through the meetings. I've had the baby. I'm still not allowed to take part. I'm still going to meeting. Everyone knows it's my child. Why would they be trying still to take my child away? My husband says to me, we're getting married. Now, we're getting married under duress because he's been told lies that aren't true about me, but he believed them. We were kids. He is absolutely not to be blamed for that. I have a child that's going to be taken away from me, and that is why we got married. Today, he'll say we married for love. We did marry for love, but it was masked by all of this other stuff. All of this other stuff masked that. We had a really, really rough first several years of our marriage. We were married for several years before one day we had a conversation, and he said, I know that what I was told was a lie about you. He says, I know that was a lie. I know that was people trying to split us up.
I bet that felt good to hear.
It did. It was the beginning of us really having a relationship with each other, because up until that point, it was like we were in the same house, but we didn't even talk to each other. And that was the start of us moving here and starting our own life together. And it was the start of him choosing me over other people, which was huge. But he trusted me again. And now I will say he trusts me implicitly. I trust him implicitly. And I think we've proven to each other through our 30 years of marriage that we can. We can absolutely trust each other implicitly. And I think our children know this. I think our children have had this example in front of them. Yeah, mom and dad are not the perfect couple. Yes, they have rip-roaring arguments. They don't see eye to eye commonly, but in spite of all of that, they see that Steve has my back no matter what. Even if I'm wrong, he has my back, and vice versa. So we have an incredibly strong marriage, and I believe it was ordained in heaven. I'll just say, I think that it was ordained in heaven. So we've come through all of that, but it was shortly after I left meetings. I'm on Facebook in this group chat, and I find out about this Baldwin baby thing. And this is when I thought I was the only girl this had ever happened to. We get to chatting, and I find out this has happened to hundreds of women. And we're not talking 14-year-old girls. I mean, and if you go back to the 60s, this was a common thing in our culture. That wasn't what this was. This was still happening. It was still happening. It's still happening now. And girls and women, one woman I spoke with was 26 when she had her child, and the workers told her, you have to give your baby up or you are losing
Because
out.
she wasn't married, or?
Because she wasn't married. But she was 26. She had a career, well able to be a single mother. Another woman I talked to got pregnant with her boyfriend. They were 18 years old. They were in a very committed relationship. The workers told her, you have to give your baby up or you're going to be excommunicated. This happened in 2013. When I started talking and opening up and telling people, women started contacting me. I lost count of how many women contacted me and said, I went through this experience too. I lost my child. I gave my child up. Some of them reconnected, and it was an amazing story that they had, that they reconnected later with their children. Some of them were children who had attempted to reconnect with their birth mothers and were refused. There's a lot of trauma surrounding this. And the thing that is so sad to me is that these were people whose choice was taken away. If a woman is in a position where she cannot raise a child, she absolutely must have the right to adopt that child out to a family. She must have that right to do that. But no one should ever go to a woman and say, oh, you're having a baby and you're not married. Well, you can't have that child. One of the other stories that was shared with me that was even more shocking, although all of them are equally wrong and horrifying. One woman reached out to me and she said, when I was a little girl, my father died. I had a 7-year-old brother. The workers came to my mother and said, you have to give that son up. She said I can't remember if they had 5 or 6 girls in the family and 1 son. And the workers said, you can't raise a son as a woman without a husband. This was a woman who was widowed. They made her give her son up to another family that didn't have children, or maybe they had 1, I can't remember the details. That man sexually abused the little brother. These stories were horrific, and there were so many of them. And so I reached out to George Wright with the BBC, and I said, there's a story you've got to tell. And I told him about my own experience, and I said, but the thing is, I got to keep my child. I said, I didn't know how many didn't get to keep. And then I worked on trying to connect women with him. The sad thing was that there were so many women who couldn't come out and talk.
Yeah.
They were so traumatized by it. They were like, well, I can talk to you in this little private conversation, but even to talk to a reporter anonymously, they said, it's too traumatizing.
And I just want to add my personal thing. The thing is, like, the saying goes, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Okay? So, and you probably too, I don't know where you stand, but it's not that we're saying, or that we're, what's the word I'm looking for? It'd help if I had the word. Let's see. I guess I'll just leave it with that 2 wrongs don't make it right.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
If something happened, having a baby out of wedlock or things like that, that's not necessarily right, but it's absolutely not right to try to take that baby away and or abortions even within the, I've heard of that too.
Yes,
I can't personally verify that, but I've heard of that. But adoptions or abortions, it's just horrible to think that the workers would feel they have the right to do that. Agreed.
A lot of things happen that are not what we would call ideal circumstances. Ideal circumstances is that a child has a stable family to be born into. And absolutely 2 parents are more stable than 1. That's an absolute.
What they should do is come around that situation and support them.
Agreed.
Be their family instead of ripping families apart.
Agreed.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of studies in the last few years on what happens to infants who are adopted. And again, these are situations where I believe that 99% of the time, everyone is doing the very best thing that they can. But it is not true that an infant isn't traumatized
I can attest to
losing the mother that they are born to. And so, in other words, yes, sometimes it has to happen, but it should never be forced. And the mother should always be, unless the mother is truly incapacitated and incompetent, the fact is, the mother is the one that will die for that child. Now, I hope I'm not stepping on an adoptive mother's toes by saying that. I have been very close to a number of women who have adopted children. And I don't want to say that they aren't the real mother. So it's, excuse me, it's a very complicated, incredibly complicated subject. But I think that the bottom line is, don't take choices away from women. If there is any way to fix this or support them, put the ball in their court and let them be the one that decides, do I let the child go or do I raise the child myself? So, and the fact is that most of the time they're going to make they'll make the right decision. They know if they can or can't. They know what their support system is. And we're lying to ourselves when we think that we know better for somebody else than what they know for themselves. But in spite of all of that, several of these stories I've shared prove to me that it was about appearances, not about capability. Because the woman who already had multiple children and then her last born was a son, no, she was perfectly capable of raising her own child. The girl who in 2013 is living in a time when it's actually the norm. It's normal in America for single mothers to raise their children. she married the father of her child. They're still married, but he was non-2x2. So that was an appearance issue. This is about appearances. It's about making it look like 2x2 girls will never get pregnant outside of marriage.
Yeah, I think if we really knew the extent of what gets swept under the rugs. I mean, over the last few years, we've been able to see some of that come out. But that rug isn't just over a floor, it's over a pit. And there's so much stuff that I'm sure gets covered up. And looking back now, like, so my parents live on the convention grounds, having convention right this very second. And the overseer at the time said some things that I look back at now and I'm like, why did he tell me that, first of all? And like, he was implying that a lot more happens than the average friend in meetings sees.
Yes.
And it's crazy, but because it's an appearance-based religion, all of that is just quietly taken care of, which is just sad and horrible, but it makes sense now from the outside of why they do what they do.
But the sad thing is that when you bury sin, if you will, in that way, or things that don't align with your beliefs, when you hide them, now you lose the ability to deal with them. So nothing gets fixed.
No.
And so many of the things that have gone wrong in the sect didn't need to happen. They didn't need to happen. And why they don't just admit that now and clean it up and move forward different is beyond me. But that was a hard thing for me. And when I discovered that and started talking to people, I started talking to my parents and I said, wow, I had no idea. I said, do you realize how lucky we are that we still have Tanner? Because that was rare. It was so rare that a child was kept in a family. Now, that was maybe 2 or 3 months into my exit when that happened. And it was a year after I left. I believe it was in March.
Clarify when that happened.
When that was. So
no, clarify what happened a year or two before you left. The Dr. Baldwin finding out about that?
That happened. Sorry, I didn't clarify. I found out about that within 2 or 3 months of leaving.
Okay.
Yes, in the support group. And that was kind of the beginning of, wow, what has actually happened in this sect. What we didn't know about yet was the extent of the sexual abuse. A few months after that, some people started talking about, and we were talking about, oh, we liked this worker, and then someone brought up on a conversation, this is really traumatizing for me that people are talking about this worker and how wonderful they were because that worker sexually abused me.
This was pre-Dean Brewer?
This was pre-Dean Brewer. Some of these conversations started pre-Dean Brewer, and pre-Dean Brewer, quite a few people in the ex-support groups were already catching on to the fact that there had been serial child molesters who had been passed around in the sect, and that people were absolutely in the know and they weren't cleaning it up.
Here, move your chair up just a little bit, and then you can be out of the sun.
I started telling my parents about this stuff too. Of course, being cautious with what I shared because this is a support group. You don't share names, you don't give details of things. But I did tell them I didn't realize that all of these things had happened. And that's when some stories opened up in my own family. And I found out about family members who had been sexually molested by workers. I have a big family. We go back several generations into my twoism. So no one's going to sit here, watch this video, and figure out who I'm talking about. Many, many cousins, siblings, everyone who was raised in aunts and uncles. But there were a number that had been sexually molested by workers. Some of the names that were coming up in our support group were people who'd been in our home when I was a child.
Isn't that a horrible, I remember before I left, and this was after I left. I remember finding the court document his mugshot when he got arrested, and the court document, the booking statement, whatever, online. And I was like, man, this guy was in my home.
Yeah.
So many times.
Yeah.
And we sat at his gospel meeting.
And
so many
people
times.
knew. There were people who knew that.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have been having a gospel meeting.
Yeah.
There was one that I came across where there was a document. It was in California, and now I couldn't find it again to save my life. But at one point, someone pointed me to it. So there are people who know. He was sued. A worker sued for over $1 million. There was a settlement of over $1 million that was covered. That settlement was covered. I don't know who covered it, but he was a worker, so I don't think he covered it himself. But I'm assuming the friends covered it.
Ultimately, whether it came from some sort of trust fund or a wealthy friend, it had to be.
Yeah. But so where I'm going with this is that by the time the Dean Brewer story broke, we already knew in the support groups that this was a huge, huge thing, and that Dean Brewer wasn't one bad apple, but that it was going to blow the thing apart. And I went to my husband, and remember, he's already been exploring this other church. This is the only part I'll tell about my husband. He's already been exploring another church. We've already been having conversations. We've already been following some people on YouTube, learning what the Bible actually says. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, this all makes sense. The Dean Brewer thing broke. It didn't break publicly. It broke in the support groups first. And I went to him and I said, I'm going to tell you about something. And I said, up until this point, the workers have been welcome in our home. You have continued to have Wednesday night meeting in our home. Workers have stayed in our home.
When you had Wednesday night meeting, you didn't go, though?
I did at first.
Okay.
I did for the first maybe 3 or 4. I told myself it's just a Bible study. So I can go, and I can go with a clear conscience. It's just a Bible study. But I went, and then I would sit there and be like, this is not just a Bible study. Mm-hmm. And I felt very, very condemned by the fact that I was participating at all. And I finally told Steve, I can't participate. I said, I will either be gone or I will just go take myself to another part of the house and close the door and I won't be part of it. But I said, I feel like there is something really wrong in that meeting and I can't be part of it. It's condemning.
And again, I don't want for you to speak for your husband, but how did he react to that? Because if it was me, I would be devastated.
I don't know what his feelings were. This would be a good question to ask him. How did you feel when I said that? But you remember, he's questioning things too, but at the same time, his parents are in, his siblings are in, his cousins are all in. Like I mentioned before, he had cousins in the work, he had an uncle in the work, and a very, very much of a respected uncle in the work. So he's really being torn in two here. He's really being torn in two. And I don't want to put him in a position where he has to choose me over his family. Mm-hmm. So I don't know exactly how he felt. I don't think he would have felt devastated as in my wife is losing out. I don't think that was it. Okay. But he might have felt devastated as in my wife is abandoning me. And that's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you told him, I'm not going to go to meetings.
I told him I won't be in meetings anymore at all, not even Wednesday night. So I would go someplace else in the house. But when the Dean Brewer thing came up and we learned about it, and again, it was not public yet. I said to him, I've done all of this. Meeting's been in our house. The workers come, I feed them meals, I prepare the room for them, they stay overnight. I said, no worker will ever again cross the threshold of our door. That will never happen again. No worker will ever come into our house. This is a big statement because I've got a cousin in the work and so does he. I said, meeting will never be in our home again. And I said, we will stay married. You may choose to go to meeting elsewhere. But I said, this house will not be connected to a religion that is full of pedophiles. And he just sat there for a little bit. And I wasn't expecting this. He sat there for a little bit and he says, I will call Aiden, my cousin. I'll tell him there won't be meeting here anymore. I will tell him he needs to find somewhere else for meeting. And he said, I will also let him know I won't be back. So for him, I like to think, and I had this idea in my head that I wanted everyone to see that the doctrine was such a muddle. I wanted people to leave, and I felt like that was the right reason. I felt like the right reason to leave was because you saw the doctrine was so contrary. But now that I've sat with it long enough, no, actually, the right reason to leave also includes because it's full of perpetrators. That's actually a completely legitimate reason to leave.
And then figure out the doctrine.
Exactly. It's a perfectly good reason to leave. That's why my mother left, I believe. Ultimately, the thing that bothered her so much was learning about the pedophiles. And she said to me, had my parents known what was going on, they never would have come to meetings and professed. And had they found out later, they would have kicked the workers out and said, you won't darken this door. She said they would not have allowed them in. And so that was comforting. Now, the thing about my mother, and again, I know my mom is going to watch this. Hi, Mom. Many, many years ago, this was back in my years of atheism. I was in my 20s. And it's true that we look for these stabilizing factors. We want stabilizing factors in our lives. We want our parents to never change. We want them to never move out of the house they're in. We want to never stop going to convention every year. It's very destabilizing and troubling. But in my 20s, I had this horrifying nightmare that my mother quit going to meeting. And I remember waking up from that, just like in a cold sweat. It's such a horrible thing.
In a cold sweat?
Cold sweat.
It was a joke.
Cold
it was
sweat.
a dad joke. I'm sorry.
So it was really, really a horrifying dream. I didn't share this dream with anybody. In my dream, my mother had been an old lady, like 70, 80. She'd been an old lady in this dream. Well, amazingly enough, this year, just after my mom turned 75, she left meetings.
Wow.
That's a big deal.
That is a huge deal at that age, because it's easier. Well, it's easier for anybody just to stay.
Yes.
It's easier to stay. I met a lady, I think she was 82 or 83, and we met her. We didn't do an interview with her, but that is the most beautiful thing to see. Somebody who has been going to meetings for 80 years come to the realization and the freedom we have in Christ, and that it's Christ alone. I have such respect for those people because, and it's so amazing that even though they maybe only have a tenth of their life left or whatever, that they're enjoying the freedom that we have in Christ and coming out of that legalism.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yes. Yeah, that was a really joyful moment for me. And I won't share all of the things that she said to me, but I'll just say this. So we had all of these conversations. She hesitated. Maybe a year ago, maybe it was a year ago that she said that she was done. She was going to quit, and then she didn't. She kind of wavered, went back and forth a little bit. When she did leave, she was truly done. She was finished. And it's such a comfort to me. My husband's parents left. They as well had a meeting in their home. They were the elders for at least 30 years, maybe more, of their meeting. And again, I don't want to speak for somebody else, but I think ultimately what brought them out as well was the fact that all of these abuses came to light. And they said, this is proof that it's not right. There can't be this much going on, and people refusing to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that, like you said earlier, the abuse is an absolute legitimate reason to leave. And I think God is using that. Clearly, he's using it, especially the Dean Brewer thing.
Let me just flip this off. Sorry.
That's okay. But if you don't leave and you know about it, I personally believe you're supporting it.
I believe that as well. This question just came up in the last couple of days in one of the X support groups, and it's the one that's labeled Christian X support group.
Okay.
And someone said, well, they said, my spouse says that if church isn't what saves you and you can go to any church and be saved, then why can't you go to meeting church and be saved? And my response was, if you know who Jesus is, and you know that this church denies who Jesus is, and you continue to go to the church that denies who Jesus is, even when you know who Jesus is, you are in the same position. Jesus said, what was the verse? Even, well, Satan himself even knows. Satan, all of the angels even know. They even know who Jesus is. No, that doesn't cut it. If you know and you purposely choose to support something that is wrong, to me, that's worse than being in it and not knowing and just continuing.
And I'll add to that you can go to any local church, but you still have to use discernment, right?
Yes.
Because there is churches out there, there is other cults out there, many of them, and so you still have to use the discernment that you're given, but also just biblical. Does this line up with the Bible? But I agree with you 100%. The main thing for me personally that defines a cult is denying Christ's deity. That's the main thing. And then there's other things that fall into that too. If you deny who Christ is, everything's wrong. So why, coming to the knowledge of Christ, that Christ alone is who saves you, why continue to go to meetings, like you said, where they deny that?
Exactly.
So I agree 100% with that.
And I could probably open up the New Testament Gospels and find situation after situation after situation that supports that idea. That after you know, and in fact, not just the Gospels, after you know, why would you continue? It's the same thing as continuing to follow the old law, for example, which half the New Testament is about. Finding Jesus, but then continuing to serve the old law. Why would you do that?
You can't. You can't continue to produce your own self-righteousness and expect Jesus' sacrifice. Because it says, if you can be justified by the law, Christ died for no purpose. So if we're trying to be justified by self-righteousness, which is what the Friends and Workers do, Christ died for no purpose. So why stay in that?
Exactly. And I think that's probably the foundation of it all. I mean, the foundation of Christianity.
It is.
If you don't get that one, then it's like there's no point in even moving beyond that. You have to get that first.
We've been wanting to, by the time this this interview is online, it will be out. But Marty and I did a podcast on, is Jesus God? And I think it's probably the most important video we've done, because we walk through, and I can link it at the end of this video, but we walk through all the biblical, no, we don't even come close to all the biblical passages, but we do an hour and 15 minutes worth of going through, pointing out where it says that clear as day, and where it doesn't say it clear as day, but, so that is the ultimate foundation of, and it's so hard for us when we come out of the 2x2s, because that's so contrary to what we're taught.
Yes.
And it's hard for humans in general to understand who God is, but it's extremely important to get that right.
It is extremely important to get that right, because that's the foundation that you have to build on.
Yeah, Christ is the cornerstone.
He is the cornerstone. There's an instance in the Gospels that, it was several that really struck me, that also, if you read in a modern language, become even more apparent. But there is one place where, actually probably more, where Jesus was worshipped by people. If Jesus was merely a human, or even if he was Son of God only, but not the deity, not part of the deity himself, he would have never allowed them to do that.
It was against, and that's why they tried to stone him.
Exactly.
But it was against, I mean, you shall only have one God and worship him only.
Mm-hmm. So
Yep.
if Jesus wasn't God and he allowed them to worship him, then Jesus himself has to be thrown out of the entire equation. You can't accept Jesus and not accept his deity. It doesn't work. It's not scriptural.
Amen.
So that's the end of the matter.
Yeah.
So that was our experience coming out, and life has really done a pretty big change for us. But this is what I'll say about that, and I think this could be helpful maybe for some other people who've come out, because we're so troubled by our whole family needs to be saved, right? My faith is different now. I have faith. I have faith that God loves my sons more than I do. I have faith that God continues to work with all of my family members. I have faith that God will lead them to where they need to go when it's time. It may not look exactly like my faith journey. It might be very different from my own. But I've got faith in that. And I've often thought, why do people live to be about 80 years old? Well, because that's how long it takes to get the basics. So these young people, you know, or even older people, I don't sit around worrying about their souls like I used to.
Yeah. Yeah, it God's timing is perfect. And for us who have come out of the 2x2s or any high control group for that matter, we understand it more than anybody that it has to come from God.
Yes.
So God uses people to plant seeds, but ultimately people can't do anything.
Right.
Right? It has to come from God. And so, yeah, there should be a burden for souls for them to know the true gospel. But then the prayer life to back that up more than anything, right? Like so I understand what you're saying. It's different than what we came out of. Yeah.
It's very different than what we came out of. I remember going to conventions and sitting there crying when I was a child because all of my school friends were going to hell.
Yeah, I've heard that before. That's a common thing.
It's a really tough burden to put on a child. We have a visitor.
Yeah. Hey, buddy. All right. So anything we haven't gone over yet? As you said, you could go all day, but
Yeah.
That you want to include in this video, and then I have the question I ask everybody.
Sure. I don't think that there's anything that I really want to include in this video beyond what I've said. I've probably said more than I needed to.
Okay. So what advice, and you've given lots of advice, but what advice do you have for somebody who's still in meetings that's maybe questioning, but maybe not? Maybe somehow, if they're watching this video, they're probably questioning if they still go to meetings. But what advice do you have, just in a few sentences?
I would really strongly advise them, firstly, to trust their own emotions that are telling them. That's something that we were taught to not do. We were taught, don't trust your soul, don't trust your heart, don't trust yourself. I understand there is a little bit of scripture that backs that, but actually, the real reason you're told that is so that you don't ask questions. If your gut is telling you that something is wrong, you need to explore that. Maybe your gut's wrong, maybe it's right, but you are absolutely always safe in looking for the real truth. Don't be afraid of looking for the real truth. And then another thing I would encourage people to do, although plenty of people have come out without doing this, I would encourage them to get a modern language Bible and read it just like my mother advised me to. Pretend like you've never heard the gospel preached before. Read the New Testament version of the Bible, or the New Testament portion of the Bible in a modern English version. I think that's really important.
I'd agree with both of those things. Yep. Well, I appreciate your time. So I was looking back at the Facebook Messenger when you originally messaged me was December of 23.
Oh, interesting.
So before any of the videos had gone up, or no, maybe after one or two had gone up, and we've been trying to work it out, and so it worked out. I'm glad we finally got to share your story a little bit, and so that's pretty cool. Do you want your email in the description for people to reach out to you?
Oh, interesting. I'll just say this. I mean, we could do that, but the other thing is I am very active on Facebook.
Okay.
And anybody could message me, and I am going to check those messages.
Okay. So find you on Facebook and message.
Find me on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. We can do that.
Do you have my name?
Yeah. I can put your name in the description if you want.
Okay.
So, but again, I appreciate it, and I'm sorry for what you went through, especially with the worker that tried to take your son away. I
was one of many. I got to keep my son.
Yeah.
I have him.
Yeah, and praise the Lord for that. It's just it's crazy to think about, and it's so sad. But yeah. So, I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out and making this effort.
Yeah.
Your videos have been pretty great, pretty helpful.
That's good. Praise the Lord.